Chapter 21. Gone to Jail. Francie woke with a plan. She would take a swim, cool her scratches from the previous night, scrub with false naphtha soap to remove any poison ivy oil, apply aloe to her bites, and brood. She planned to brood on the following issues. Who might have killed Buck Thorne? Whom had she seen back in the peat bog last night? What had he or she been doing? Where had TJ been? What was she going to do about her grandfather? And where had Aunt Astrid's hot dish gone? But before she started thinking about anything, she needed a cup of coffee. She climbed the stairs to the cabin and opened the screen door. "Aunt Astrid," she said. "Jeanette?" No answer. But she'd known that they wouldn't answer as soon as she stepped in. She'd sensed the emptiness of the place. Then she saw the note. "Gone to jail. Coffee cake in kitchen. Help yourself." Oh, for the love of Mike. She had slept through the whole thing. The sheriff coming, arresting them, taking them away in a boat. How would she have not heard the boat motor? Ridiculous. Francie grabbed the car keys from off the kitchen table, crammed a piece of coffee cake in her mouth, and ran down the stairs to the boathouse. There, she stuffed her wallet into her bag and dashed down the dock to the boat. The motor roared to life, and Francie drove the boat across the lake, docked it at Sandy's, hurried past the surprised Sandy to her aunt's car, and finally, on the drive to town, had time to review what she had meant to be thinking about, which had taken on a special urgency. She would have to find the killer if she wanted to get her aunts out of jail, because for sure Rydell wasn't going to do much about it, especially since he thought he caught the killers already. Who might have wanted to kill Buck? Considering his personality, probably lots of people. She recollected that his ex-wife, Rose, had thrown a glass of wine on him at the party. Who would know what Rose might have been mad about? Who else might have ill will toward Buck? Buck Jr., maybe? Maybe that receptionist at Paradise Realty knew something. She probably knew everything. Francie would go see her today. Francie moved on to the next item on her mental checklist. What had she seen last night exactly? Who might have been back in the peat bog, and what had that person been doing? She had heard Buck Jr. say he had found treasure. In there, he had said. He must have meant in the woods. He had found something in the woods, was digging it up, and Francie had stumbled on it. She'd have to follow up on that. Francie charged into the sheriff's office, clipping an elderly gentleman and causing him to drop a package he was carrying. Francie stooped to pick it up. "Francesca," the man said sharply. "Granddad," Francie choked out when she looked up. "What a surprise." "I bet it is, young lady. Can you please explain what kind of trouble you're in?" "Oh, she's not in any trouble," the sheriff said, sauntering up to them belly first. "It's her aunts who are in trouble." Francie watched one bushy white eyebrow rise in that slow, ominous way it did when her grandfather was about to disapprove of something. "I'd like to say that I'm surprised, but I can't say that I am," he said. "Granddad," Francie pleaded. "I'm pleased that you're not in trouble, but I am displeased with about many other things. Shall I list them?" Without waiting for her to answer, he continued. 1. Not consulting me about your plans to travel. 2. Traveling on your own without permission. 3. Not returning my phone calls. 4. Lying about your whereabouts. "I didn't lie," Francie protested, then remembered Buck's explanation about sins of commission and omission. Maybe she had lied by omission. "Okay, maybe I did kind of lie, but that's because I knew you wouldn't approve, and you're darn tootin' I don't approve. Not one little bit. Here you are, back in the bosom of your aunts, who are reliable in only one thing, and that is their nuttiness. Now they're in jail, no doubt, for some cockamamie scheme they cooked up." Actually, they're in for murder, the sheriff offered. Francie would have liked to punch the amused look off his face. Excuse me, she said to the sheriff. What happened to presumed innocent? Those are the charges, the sheriff said. That's all I meant. Jeanette is named as an accessory. Her grandfather dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. I've got 2 tickets home, he said. Flight leaves tomorrow, so I'll give you the rest of today to get your things together and say goodbye to your aunts. Meet me in the lobby of the Inn on the Lake at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I can't go now, Francie said. I'm not going to go when Aunt Astrid and Aunt Jeanette are in jail. I've got to prove they didn't do it. Pfft. Her grandfather waved his hand dismissively. Young lady, you're not even old enough to be considered a young lady. You're just a girl. Leave this sort of thing to the professionals. Law enforcement will take care of it. No, they won't. Francie fought the urge to bring her foot down in a petulant little stamp. She refused to look at the sheriff because she knew he was smirking. Tomorrow we leave for the city, her grandfather said. Why are you being so unreasonable? Francie asked. Anyway, I'm not going. I don't think I need to remind you of certain financial realities, her grandfather said. Francie groaned inwardly. The trust fund, which he held over her head at every opportunity. If you continue to demonstrate this kind of immaturity, I may have to move the age at which you can access your fund. Come on, Francie cried. You can't seriously think I'm going to leave my aunts in this predicament. They got themselves into it, they can get themselves out of it, her grandfather said. You know what, Granddad? Francie said. You're heartless. You could be using your influence to help, you know, instead of making things worse. You don't have to be such a curmudgeon. That's quite enough, Francesca, her grandfather said, and spun around, then turned back and handed her the package he was carrying. You know where the post office is, I assume. Please mail this for me. He handed her some cash, which she stuffed in her pocket. Then he finished by saying, I'll see you in the morning. He pushed the door open and disappeared down the street. As if she had nothing else to do but mail packages all day. Francie took a moment to collect herself before turning to face Sheriff Johnson. You must have been out partying last night, he said from his swivel chair, looking her up and down. Francie glowered at him. You haven't the slightest idea what I was doing last night or what I saw. Well, you're busy arresting helpless old ladies. I don't know about helpless. The sheriff pointed to his black eye. Francie winced. So, the sheriff continued, your grandfather don't seem impressed by your... Just tell me what's going on, Francie cut him off. Sheriff Johnson waved a piece of paper at her. We got the report back from the lab. Francie glanced at the black dog sprawled alongside his desk. Not that one, he said. The lab in Minneapolis. There were traces of cyanide found on the spatula. Cyanide? Francie squawked. That should convince everyone it wasn't Astrid. Everyone would have believed it if she poisoned him with ptolemine or salmonella or something. Everyone's afraid of Astrid's casseroles exactly because of that. But cyanide? Where would she even get such a thing? And anyway, she may or may not have dished out poisoned food, but that doesn't mean she's the one who put the poison in it. We've got the fingerprints, we got the evidence, we got the results. A motive? Francie asked. Do you have that? Why would Astrid want to kill Buck? Now, don't be too worried, the sheriff said, leaning in toward her and lowering his voice. I'm sure they'll get off with some kind of insanity plea. They're not insane, Francie cried. Now, don't be too hasty, the sheriff said. I'll pretend I didn't hear you. Like I said, we got the fingerprints, the evidence, the results. The sheriff waved the sheet of paper again. What we don't got is the hot dish. Maybe you should see if you can find that. Maybe I should see if I can find them their lawyer, she said, and made a point of using the sheriff's phone to make the call. Mr. Sage was in a meeting, the receptionist said, but he would speak with her aunts this afternoon. Yes, of course he would give her a call. Francie was trembling when she stepped out of the sheriff's office. She had one day to get her aunts out of jail. That meant one day to figure everything out. Who was the killer, or killers? Who was the mysterious shoveler? And where was TJ going at night? Maybe she didn't have to figure everything out, but there was still a murderer on the loose somewhere. Though the day was warm and getting warmer, a chill traveled down her spine. Or she could defy her grandfather. Oh boy, she shouldn't even be thinking this way. He held the purse strings in the form of the trust fund she had been counting on to give her the freedom she so desired. Was it worth yet more years of being under Granddad's thumb to defy him this one time? If he said he'd bump up the age at which she could access the money, he meant it. That meant she had to solve everything today. Now. No problem. First, she would follow up her hunch to check on potential enemies of Buck Thorne. That meant a visit to Paradise Realty. Darcy, the receptionist, was not so surreptitiously texting under the desk. Francie startled her when she said her name. "Oh," Darcy said, "didn't hear you come in." "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" Francie asked. "Fire away," Darcy said, glancing at her phone. "Just wondering if you knew anybody who might want to see Buck Sr. dead. Are you a PI or something?" "No," Francie said simply. She was planning to ask the questions, not answer them. "Well, pretty much everybody had a reason to, I suppose," Darcy said. "He's like the perfect murder victim, 'cause everybody hated him. Like those murder mysteries when everybody hates the guy who gets killed, so everybody's a suspect." "You too?" "Well, he was kind of obnoxious," Darcy said. "But wait, I didn't hate him that much. I didn't kill him. I mean, I could be out of a job now, you know?" "I'm not accusing you," Francie said. "What about his ex-wife, Rose?" "Yeah, she hated him too. But why would she kill him? Then the alimony payments would stop, right?" Darcy said. "How about Buck Jr.?" Francie asked. The receptionist's face became a mask of thinly disguised disgust. What about him? Did he get along with his dad? His stepdad, you mean? "Oh," Francie said. Maybe the idea of Buck Jr. as the killer was less remote than she thought. "Well, did they get along, the two of them?" "They fought some," Darcy said, "mostly over money. Buck Jr. always wanted money." "What did he want it for?" "What didn't he want it for?" Darcy said. "Usually money for one of his toys, like that big speedboat." "That great big boat is Buck Jr.'s?" "Yeah, I think so," Darcy said. "He was always needing gas money for it, or for his diving obsession." "Diving? Scuba diving?" Darcy nodded. "He's really into it." "He does it around here?" "I guess. Don't know what he finds. There's not really anything very pretty to look at, like in the Bahamas or something. Just brown fish, brown rocks, brown sand, brown weeds. Ick." "Has he ever said anything to you about finding something?" Francie asked, steering the conversation back to the issue. "Like what? Some kind of treasure, maybe?" Darcy snorted. "Well, he does like to brag about stuff, but then you never know if he's just making it up or what. Like he told me he finally found that treasure out at Enchantment." "Ha!" Francie caught her breath. Did he say where anything else about it? Anything more specific about where? Darcy looked up at her and gave her a pitying glance before turning her attention back to her phone. "I wouldn't get jazzed about it. Buck is so full of bull." Humor me, Francie said. It's not like I'm going to go dig it up myself or anything. Oh, he's not digging anything up, Darcy said. He says the treasure is under enchantment. Under enchantment? Like bewitched? Francie asked. No, Darcy said. Under enchantment. Under the lake.